Now let's talk about the setup of a SAM application project. SAM command line tool has a handy example Hello World application. That you can use to get started. Let's take a look at how this is laid out. So we can see here that it automatically generates a README, a Hello World directory, which contains the Lambda application itself, and a file called template YAML. The Python code is in the Hello World directory. You can take a quick look at that. You can see it's a simple Lambda with a Lambda handler, which accepts an event in a context from an API gateway, and then just returns a simple hello world. But let's look at the template file. This is where the SAM application is described, and this is what will determine how it is built and deployed. So SAM template format is an extension of the CloudFormation format with some extra resources. In order to use the resources that are available for SAM, you need to add this transform here that tells it that it works with the serverless format. The first section is just a description. Then there's a global section. These are global attributes that are set across different resources. So you can set an attribute that will work for multiple resources at once. The resources are the real heart of the file. There's many different kind of resources. As I mentioned, there's DynamoDB tables, API gateways, S3 buckets. These can all be defined in here. But this one defines merely a simple serverless function, which is what a Lambda is. So here's the name as it's referred to in this document, the Hello World function. And then this is the type, and this is where if it was an S3 bucket or a table, the type would be different. And then it has properties. The first property is the location of the code. In this case, the code is local, and it's in the directory Hello World. The next is the entry point for the code. So in the app file, we saw that there was a Lambda handler method, and that's the entrance for this Lambda. It has the runtime, and then the events are the events that would prompt the Lambda to act. So in this case, the event type is from an API, which means there'll be an API gateway attached to it. And then it has a path for that API and the method that's associated with it. You can define an API gateway as a separate resource, especially if you want to use a Swagger file or do something more complicated. But if you're not doing something more complicated, you can leave that out and it will be automatically generated based on the number of serverless functions in the file. Down here are simply some outputs that are useful for being able to get values out later on. Let's look at a slightly more complicated one. So we can see this one under resources has a Lambda named read DynamoDB event. It has code URL and a handler and a runtime just as we did before. The event type, however, is of type DynamoDB instead of API. And then down here we see we have the DynamoDB table actually defined. The table has its own properties, including its write capability, its read capability, and other things you'd use in creating a DynamoDB table. So you can see that we could add many more resources and make a very complicated application just by using these definitions in the SAM file. Otherwise, you can see that this application is very similar. Similar layout. You have the application code, the app along with its requirements, put in a separate directory that's laid out in the template file. So this should give you an idea of how a SAM application is laid out, and most importantly to think about is the template file itself, because that's where you're really going to be defining things.